Okay. Reverend Drew is on his way up, and as soon as he arrives, we will officially start. But I want to thank all of you from UUSB who chose to come today and to stay for this very important meeting. And I especially want to thank all of you volunteer and staff from Needlepoint Sanctuary. It's good to see you here. And I hope you will come back on Sundays and spend more time with us. It's nice to see such young people in the room.
Yeah, there we go. So, Sue, what have you done so far? I'm the main. I'm just catching my breath because we were doing some dancing downstairs to different songs and relating to what the different emotions were in that dance. And so, yeah. Whew. The agenda that we have today, we've got it up here on the PowerPoint. We'd like to start with reading our covenant as a reminder of who we are as a community and how we want to hold each other. And then I have a couple points that I hope will help guide our conversation so that we can live into our covenant. And then we're going to have a couple short presentations from Willie Hurley from Needlepoint Sanctuary, and then Carolina Rojas Besekas, okay, who has joined us from the main CDC. So welcome to both. And then we're going to move into a little section of question and answers and clarification so we understand what is being proposed and what some of the considerations might be and whatnot. And Zach and Tracy have, from council, have decided to be part of that conversation to help folks know what we've been thinking about and talking about. And then at the very end, we're going to provide an opportunity for people to share their opinions, share what they're thinking. And this will be a time where maybe we can switch to, no, we're going to do that in a second. We'll talk about the points, but we want people to be able to, we want to hear from you. This is the whole exercise of this meeting is to hear from the congregation what you're thinking, not talking for other people, but thinking what you're thinking, feeling for yourself around this proposal. So let's start. Let's pull up the UUSB covenant, and let's read our covenant together. We are a welcoming, inclusive, progressive community of spiritual souls. Oh, here we go. Okay. And enjoy to celebrate life. We commit to our principles by treating each other and our greater. Excellent. So let's pull up the next slide here. And to help us engage in that living into our covenant, here are a couple suggestions to help guide our conversation. As we're speaking, let's speak from our own experiences and thoughts and be mindful not to try and speak for others. This is a way that gives us some integrity and honesty. Try to speak your truth and as mindfully as possible, using trying to avoid language that might be triggering or trying to arouse a particular mindset or a particular perspective. try to be as succinct as possible. We want people to be able to fully express themselves, but we also want to hear from as many people as possible without being here all afternoon. So if you can, be succinct. And then the other part of this exercise is to listen deeply. Again, as I said today, we are not trying to take a vote or a straw poll or anything like that today. This is just an opportunity to hear, take the pulse of the congregation, get a feel for where the congregation is, and that is enough. That will inform our leadership and help us figure out what we want to do going forward. So any questions before we move forward? Bruce? Okay, we're not going to need to use, this screen is going to stay up, so there's no more information that I know of that's coming up on the screen, if that's helpful to you, okay? Anything else? Great question. Good to know. We want people to be able to engage. Okay? So, let's start with Willie, and then Carolina will follow up a little bit talking about the need or the importance of this project from the main CDC perspective. Okay, great. Willie, you have the podium.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Willie Hurley. I'm the Executive Director of Needlepoint Sanctuary. So good to see so many familiar faces and so many new faces here today. I'm going to save all of the boring factual information from my colleague Carolina and briefly speak a moment to, when I was thinking about this last night, I was thinking about speaking to two things, speaking to facts, which is the factual reality of our expansion, which is actually pretty simple. And then, I don't know if it's feelings, but it's something I heard in this room today, which was this idea that outside of these walls, outside of this space of sanctuary, there's this sense of encroachment, and that it is ever present, I think, in human history, but in particular in this day and age where we might have our own communities, we might have a sense of safety and of security and of belonging, and we're fighting for this, and just outside of it is like bad things, scary things happening, whether it's political rhetoric, whether it's climate change, whether it's poverty, whether it's just this thing in the air, this system that is really just not meeting the needs of the vast majority of people, right? So Needlepoint Sanctuary was a response to that feeling there early on before I could fully articulate it. Zach and I and some others founded Needlepoint Sanctuary, and we were young, we were there, rebellious. I think we were like 24 and 25. This was 6 or 7 years ago. So this was our defiance to an uncaring world, and we had to make physical this rebellion and this defiance, and over time we did, really, right? We have made it mass, we have made it tissue, and we've accomplished this through a lot of work and through a lot of support, many people in this room, and through this congregation in this space. So the last year has been absolutely insane. We went from being an entirely volunteer-led program with maybe we got like $25,000 in donations a year, which went right to supplies, to having 8 staff and over $300,000 in funding. So my head's just been spinning. Like I had to learn accounting this year. I had to learn all these different things. I had to like field endless conversations with folks within this congregation, in the community, the state, the CDC, the municipal government here, our lovely neighbors, folks like that. And I'm kind of coming into this very burnt out. I'm pretty tired. Like I feel like I'm at the end of a very large chapter. And what I hope this next chapter can look like for Needlepoint Sanctuary is the proposal I'm going to talk about, right? So that proposal is that we, Needlepoint Sanctuary, do syringe services in the Dorothy Memorial Hall twice a week. And I think we're going to get to a lot of the specific details with that within your questions and through Carolina, but it doesn't represent too much more than what we already do, right? So when we came into this space, we were a syringe service program. That's always what we've done. Syringes are kind of like, you know, they're like the point of the work, right? And then you have the whole body of this thing that follows, which is many other additional services, right? So we work with people who inject drugs. And as a matter of course, they need clean and sterile syringes to inject drugs. And oftentimes, we are the only service provider that they are reaching out to. We are the only vaguely positive thing in their life that they're coming into contact with. And through this, that's where the real work happens, right? So the syringes, I've always kind of understood them as the thing to draw people in, and they have a very functional purpose too, right? Because when people don't have access to clean syringes, well, I hate to tell you this, they don't use less drugs. They use the exact same amount of drugs. They just do so unsafely, and they end up sharing syringes, and you get the spread of hepatitis and HIV. And currently in this community, we are experiencing an HIV cluster outbreak, which I'll let Carolina get more into in a little bit. And so wrapping that thought up is just that syringes, I think as my friend here said, it's not the tail that's wagging the dog, right? The syringes are a small integral component of our services, and every other component of those services, we've already been doing those services right here, except for the syringes. So the expansion relates to allowing us to do syringe services out of that room, and what it's going to look like is it's going to be pretty regimented in terms of times and people coming in. People will come in, they will access services, they will exchange used syringes for clean syringes, they will receive additional services, whether it's testing, whether it's wound care, whether it's meeting with a doctor or a nurse that's working with us through another program, or whether it's meeting with one of our peer support specialists. And I had one other thought, it was really good. Space, sanctuary. I'm really just looking forward to all of your questions, because then that's probably going to help me remember exactly what I was about to say. Yeah, again, thank you all so much. Everything we've done in the last year, like we've tripled the amount of people we're providing service to, right? And this goes so much deeper than just, you know, handing someone something, right? It's building real and impactful relationships, right? So we've been able to play a crucial role in responding to the HIV outbreak. We've been able to get dozens of people into detox and on the road into recovery. We've been able to do referrals for dozens of other things. And I think anyone who's been here for something like the Warming Center can kind of see the relationships that we build with people. And we're very grateful to you and excited to keep working with you in service to this community. I'm going to pass it over back to Drew and then Carolina. Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carolina. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Viral Hepatitis and Harm Reduction Program Manager at Maine CDC. So this is Willie's Needlepoint Sanctuary's proposal, and I'm more so here to provide any other information and like facts about harm reduction and how the state works with syringe service programs. So we do certify them. We do provide some amount of funding to certified syringe service programs. And I just want to say, right, like harm reduction is so important, right? It's a social justice movement. It is about health justice. It's about meeting the needs of people who historically have been marginalized and have not been able to access our systems the way others can. And it's about meeting people where they are, right? It's about giving them the care and compassion that they need to be safe in the choices that they have every right to do. For some data, right, I work in infectious disease. For the past 3-4 years, Maine has had the highest case rates of Hep C, Hep B, and Hep A in the nation. And currently, as Willie mentioned, we are experiencing an HIV cluster in Penobscot County. For context, about every year we get about 1 to 2 cases, new cases of HIV in Penobscot County among people who inject drugs. Within the past year, up until now, we are at 18 cases, confirmed cases, so that's a huge increase. And the main risk factors for this outbreak have been injection drug use. People are reusing or sharing syringes because they can't find or access sterile syringes. So that's a huge concern. And when this cluster started, we were able to certify Needlepoint at the encampment where a lot of our efforts have been focused. And they've been able to kind of meet that need, but right, cases are still rising. We're seeing more people, and it's likely to go beyond 18, probably is much larger than that. We're just not getting enough people tested or reaching people. So syringe service programs are really important for that. They provide a lot of other resources too, a lot of linkage to care, to like social services, to doctors, to a lot of anything that people may need. So it is really it's very like well-rounded. A lot of our SSPs provide like testing, wound care. They do it all for the people that they are serving. And there's a lot of evidence that syringe service programs work, right? There's evidence that shows that they decrease hepatitis C and HIV transmission by 50%. There's evidence that shows that people who are accessing SSPs are more likely to enter recovery at some point, right? Because there's a lot of this trust being built and a lot of services being offered to folks. I think that's just kind of the gist. Let me know if you have any questions about how we work with SSPs, any questions you might have on infectious disease. I brought some stuff that I can easily pull. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking with you all and hearing your questions and concerns.
I'm going to, in just a moment. Yep. So what I'd like to do next is, how many people are fully familiar with what Needlepoint is doing now? Okay, so we've got a pretty good idea of what Needlepoint is doing now. Most of the work that they're doing, or all the work that they're doing, is in the field, except for their administrative work and storage facility in the basement. So, Zach, Zach and Tracy, you want to talk a little bit about kind of what the proposal is, a little bit more detailed of like or Willie maybe, what the ask is from our congregation of how that's changing. So it's very clear and very specific about the main change, as Willie talked about, was that they're going to be provided. So far, there's been no distribution of needles here at UUSB, but probably the biggest change is that. But the other big change is using our Dorothy Memorial Hall in a more regular space. But I'll let you talk to that.
Sure, thank you, Drew.
Okay.
For those who don't know me, my name is Zach. I'm on the council. I think actually you've touched on the key points, Drew. So we've been working with Needlepoint as a tenant in our space for over a year. The current sort of footprint that NPS, Needlepoint Sanctuary, has been using is some storage space in the basement, an administrative office. If you look at the kitchen of the Dorothy, there's a door to the right of the kitchen. It says church office. It's not, it's the Needlepoint office now and has been for quite some time. There's office space and administrative work that's been done there. And then Needlepoint is also run the warming centers, but this has never been a site of client service. As it was mentioned, Needlepoint's primary work has been with the encampment near Texas Avenue. The proposal is to have the Dorothy Memorial listed as a certified, by CDC, listed as a certified syringe exchange site. And people can ask what that certification entails and the inspections and requirements and the regulatory requirements associated with that. Well, if it's designated as an approved syringe exchange site, then Needlepoint would offer services twice a week through the Dorothy Memorial at designated times that are designed to not conflict with other user groups of the Dorothy Memorial, to provide those services. And as Willie mentioned, as we've been looking, there's a cluster of other services associated with that exchange in terms of other service providers and other professionals who would be here to assist and provide wraparound services during those times. From the council's perspective, as I mentioned, we've been working with Needlepoint Sanctuary as a tenant of the church for over a year. And we've been engaged in our due diligence as council to ensure that we fully understand and are engaged with sort of a process of improvement and communication. And from my perspective as a member of council, I've been very pleased working with Needlepoint Sanctuary and working with Willie. We have each other's numbers on our phones. We all are connected to each other. If questions come up, we engage, we text, we talk. Needlepoint's been tremendously responsive to our concerns and to our questions and also to offering help. For example, some of the things that we've dealt with collaboratively that we've been lucky to have Needlepoint as a tenant, dealing with our camping and other issues that have happened on the property to really help walk us through how to engage with those issues compassionately and clearly and have a good channel of communication with communities that are engaged in using the property and around our church. So that's been tremendously helpful. Some of the things that we've been working with in a really due diligence kind of way have been insurance and understanding a lot of these regulatory requirements and ensuring that we're doing everything that we need to as a church council, that this is done properly. So those are my key points. Tracy?
The only thing that I'm Tracy, and I'm also on the council, and the only thing that I would add, which I don't think has been brought up yet, that Willie was really adamant about when we met with him earlier during council, was that he is going to clean that Dorothy Memorial Hall after each use. So just as he practices harm reduction with everyone that he works with, he will practice harm reduction with our community as well. And I have to say, as a member of council, working with Needlepoint Sanctuary and Willie this past year has been really a remarkable way of sort of touching on my UU values, because I feel like Unitarian Universalists are experts in believing in people, and we're experts in kindness, and Willie has just made me step up to the plate and be that person that I want to be. So that's it.
Yep. So what I wanted to do right now is to ask if there are any, I'm sorry, my brain is, yeah, so I want to do some questions and answers for our panel. So if you've got questions, what I'm going to ask is that you, what? I'm going to use that in the comment section. That's what I have planned. That's part of how I wanted to organize that. So if you have a question and you're able to move, I'm going to invite you to come forward and use the microphone here. So we don't have to go zipping all over the place, but if you want to ask a question and you want to stay in your seat, just raise your hand and John Arman will bring a microphone to you. Yep. And you can all come up all at once. We'll just form a queue just like joys and sorrows. Come on up. Yep, get close.
Okay. My name is Ellen Tarashi. I'm a nurse practitioner. I work really closely with Needlepoint Sanctuary, and we've been working to respond to this HIV cluster very thoroughly and like very hard. It's very hard work. So I really appreciated their partnership. And I just want to add some context that one of the biggest syringe service providers in Bangor is now closed. Health Equity Alliance is closed, and there's a huge vacuum that needs to be filled. And Needlepoint Sanctuary would be really well placed to do that. Also, the fact that the encampment up at Texas Avenue is closing at the end of this month. So they will not be able to provide services up there. So another huge vacuum will be opened up. Wabanaki Public Health and Wellness is doing an amazing job responding to the lack of services. They're so awesome, but they need some help, and Needlepoint Sanctuary can help. Without their help, this cluster may only get worse. So it's imperative that we make this happen. Thank you so much.
I'm Connie, and as a social worker, yeah, as a member of the congregation, I'm definitely supportive of this, so very excited about this possibility of growing the services and the need. And just some logistical questions would be about, so good to hear about the cleaning. And I was also wondering if there would be also a monitoring of the outside. And I'm just thinking back to, it was really awesome, the warming center, and I came the last time we had it and brought some food, and just noticed too, it was the day that we also had the game night downstairs, and I brought in one of my families that I work with through the Maine Multicultural Center with little kids, and just a lot of people were hanging out and kind of congregating and smoking in the back door, and so I'm just putting also my mom hat on, and of just monitoring the outside and the congregating and the needles outside. So just wanted to make sure that's being addressed, as well as it sounds like it's going to be on times when there won't be kid activities and stuff like that. So just wanted to make sure that's in the thinking. Thank you.
But briefly? Yep.
Respond to each question in turn, otherwise. So yeah, thank you for that. Firstly, yes, there will be monitoring outside, and that actually already occurs a lot. So I'm pretty much here. I'm here too much. I'm working to get to a 40-hour-a-week schedule, but the last year it's been more like 60 hours a week. And what we prioritize is the relationship that we have with our program participants, right? Because we call them program participants. They're not clients. We're much more of a peer-led program in that many of us have lived in personal experience of substance use, of homelessness, and this sort of thing. So that's the kind of level that we connect with our folks on, right? And we prioritize a relationship in such a way that there's mutual respect, right? And part of that respect is boundaries, right? And so over the last year, we've seen some pretty remarkable things. We've seen unhoused community members spontaneously go around and clean up this entire property without me asking them to. Sometimes they've done that in a way that created more issues. We had someone shovel out the neighbors and they didn't appreciate it the other day, little things like that. So there's a lot of that going on. We do a ton of community cleanups. I'd be happy to kind of include, anytime we're doing services, kind of like just a loop of the building with a trash bag and a sharps container. The other thing specific to that particular, I forget where Connie went, but hi. So that night we were trying a new thing where we were getting everyone to smoke in that area because the neighbors complained about them smoking right outside and across the street last time. So we kind of had this system that then was clashing with your guys' board night. And so I think it'd be really good me and the council already have really great communication, as do Drew and I. But moving forward, like a rapid way to have those sort of conversations, like, okay, hey, we have a game night tonight. What's going on with you guys? What are you doing? Do you mind having someone kind of put a little bit of extra labor in so we can ensure that this is safe and kind of equitable for all, right?
My name's Mark, and I have a question for you. I know you spoke to the Guild recently, and I heard some just amazing statistics. Could you tell us what the need is? How many people require this service, and how many needles are required in Bangor in a given week or month?
Sure. So we don't actually fully know, right? I used to work for a program called Main Access Points, which is probably like by volume the largest program in the state, and they do a mail order program, so they're also kind of connecting. And we were estimating at the time that there are like 30,000 injection drug users in the state of Maine. So that's 30,000 people out of a population of 1.4 million. It is not what you would expect in Bangor. The issue of homelessness makes the issue of substance use very visible. Same thing in Portland, but it's not the same situation in many small towns throughout Maine. So you might have a small town that you drive through it, think, oh, they don't have a drug problem here. No, it's everywhere. And in terms of the amount of syringes an individual might use, it varies. I think in particular for someone who doesn't have a home and who's kind of like hoofing it everywhere, might be losing their bags, they're typically, and that's the population we mostly work with, they're going to need a little bit more supplies because we rely on them to then, take those supplies and get them to their friends, right? And to other people who might need them, and that way they have more if they lose them. It's not necessarily, if you're an injection drug user, that you have one needle and you do one shot in the morning and you're good. You have people who might, dose 10, 20 times throughout a day, depending on how much drugs they want to be doing, and depending on whether or not they are able to safely use those needles. Because one of the things about injection drug use, it is very harmful to your skin and to your veins, right? So does anyone here know what track marks are? Yeah, so this kind of this destruction of the arm and of the veins that happens, and is usually actually a product of people not having access to services like ours, right? So someone who's doing everything just right, following every step, and using, and filtering it right and doing all these things, injection is one of the more safer ways to use drugs. And hold off on that one, but it's cleaner than like snorting a pill or something like that if you're doing it the right way. But that is not the circumstances most people have, so they need to use many syringes. Did that answer gentleman Mark's question? So we provide in our history, since we've been taking data, we've provided services to around like 900 unique individuals. So I would say that we are offering services to over 500 people currently in the city of Bangor. And there's like an inner core of like 250 people who access our services regularly. And that having a physical brick and mortar location will really kind of bring that all together. Because right now, like as we've said, we've been a street outreach, right? So we're like connecting with people like directly where they are and doing a really good job at this, but now we'll have something, hopefully, where people can come right to us, right?
Hi, I'm Suzanne. I'm coming from a place of property management. That's what I've done for years. So I have questions that might be a little bit more. Can you hear me? Okay, so I come from a position of managing properties. And properties that are similar in the sense like the courtyard downtown, where there are a lot of common areas. And common areas are very hard, as you know, they're very hard to pay attention to. Bathrooms, hallways, places where people sit, and that's a difficult thing to do. So I just have a couple of practical questions. Lease, 60-day termination, this sounds terrible, like a bad place to start from, but let's see, within this lease, there's a 60-day termination, is that correct? Clause, I think I saw that was the way. Okay, so how would that, it's tough to do that. We don't need to plan, we don't need to come up with an answer now, but that's something that when the council and Willie are working on together, you should think about how would that happen? What would need to happen for that type of thing to occur? You have to think about these things, they're practical. Number 2, it's not easy either way. Concern about future, I know, I had a bunch of stuff. I want to make sure I do it in the right order here for myself. I won't take long, I promise. All right, so as future expansion as future expansion occurs, does this include wider portions of the church facilities, the areas? So for instance, if there's some use by the Dorothy and the office and the basement space and the bathrooms that are like near the office, right, and the Dorothy, right? That's kind of the area you use if you needed bathrooms. Does this use also include the rest of the building? Like if somebody occasionally wants to use a different, like the cafe, or if they want to use, let's say the bathrooms there are occupied, do they get to go someplace else? In a regular build, like in an ordinary situation where you have common areas, people who have an office have specific places they can be. It's not like full, carte blanche of the whole place. That's a challenge. As you know, Willie, you've had this challenging to try to pay attention to all those spots. So that's something I'm curious about. Let me go through my things. So concerned about future expansions of space and time. So for instance, if you ordinarily have, you have places that you rentals, wedding rentals, receptions, whatever's going on, contra dance, all of those things. At what point might what your needs are, okay, how might that conflict with the other needs of people that might want to use our facilities, but then in fact can't do it because perhaps the expansion of Needlepoint is that much greater, more space, more time, that sort of thing. I know this sounds heartless to go over, but I've done this for years, and it's practical. You need to think about those things. So anyway, so that's one thing. So conflicts with rental use. You might get less rental use if, for instance, hypothetical, you have somebody wants to prepare for a party, in the Dorothy, maybe the day before, or a reception or something like that, but they're not able to do that because you have to shift the schedule around a lot. All those are things that you have to think about. Let's see, 3, concern about that. 4, how does this additional use impact insurance costs? I'm not sure you have that you don't know about that. I'm a little nervous talking because there's a big group over here, and so it makes me a little nervous. But insurance, how does that get impacted by this additional use?
Suzanne, I'm wondering if maybe Zach could answer that question, because
fine.
we've had a lot of these conversations with council, and I think...
Oh, good, that's great. I didn't know who to
would be
address
good.
that
Yeah,
question
but they're
to.
great questions.
Yeah, good. And I'm quick. I'm not going to take a lot of time.
So can we get a response to that right
just-
now? Yeah, okay.
What's the insurance?
I'm happy to tackle some of the practical questions. So first, regarding the lease, there currently is not a lease. Needlepoint has an existing lease for their current use. If the council and Needlepoint agree, including bearing the feedback today in mind, if we're going to continue with an additional lease, that has not been drafted yet. But certainly, we have been looking at some of the aspects that you're talking about, Suzanne. One, I'll just deal with insurance briefly. Our primary insurer is Church Mutual. We've spoken with them. Willie, Needlepoint Sanctuary maintains an insurance policy in accordance with good business practice. We're named as an additional insured. We're confident that the insurance arrangement works. In terms of the footprint and any expansion, the footprint for use, Needlepoint's current footprint is specified in their current lease. And if there is an expansion, the specific footprint will be designated in the lease and will be limited to that. Any further usage of the building or further use or different times is communicated and agreed on ahead of time and can involve additional rental. All of that is coordinated through the business office with Christine, who handles all the scheduling with additional users, additional renters, et cetera. So all of those, I think those are addressing many of the things that you've raised, but it's the lease specifies the footprint, and it's not an open, it's not an open use of the entire space. And as some people are familiar with, one of the things that we've been working on through council and working with buildings and grounds has been trying to get our arms around the compartmentalization, safety and security and access regarding this big, rambling, wonderful building. And we've been working closely with Needlepoint on that aspect as well. Willie, is there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Suzanne, and say, like, these are the sort of questions that I really encourage people to come up and ask, right? Like, have your list with your concerns, right? I was thinking about that when we had the like the I'm Spartacus moment, and that the Spartacus movie where everyone stands up and says, so when everyone was like, oh, I'm here with Needlepoint earlier, I was like, Spartacus. But don't let that deter you. My volunteers and supporters are very friendly, and like, we want it out, right? Like, that's the whole goal of this, right? Like, this is your congregation, this is your space. We have come into this space. If you have concerns, even if it seems silly, trivial, or technical, this is the time for it. In terms of, I think, yeah, like, we have insurance, right? In terms of the general footprint in the building, I don't think it represents a huge change in our current footprint. It is basically an additional 2 events per week and some heavy activity in the Dorothy. And I think that there's a distinction that we'll talk more with the council about the way in which we exist in the building when it's just staff and when it's like an event with program participants coming in. Because anytime that we open these doors and we have participants coming in, whether it's a warming center or an educational event, we kind of lock it down, right? Like, during the warming centers, we had, a table over there so that nobody could get into the sanctuary. And we try to do that for the purpose of safety, cleanliness, and just not using all the space. But then, like, me as a staff person, I'll be honest, I came in here the other day and cried. I might do that again if that's okay from time to time. So we'll just like, when there's staff in the building, sometimes, like, I notice, like, we'll run into a congregation person because we have storage space in the basement on this corner of the church, and we have administrative space in precisely the opposite end of the church. So you will see us like little ants carrying things back and forth, and be like, what is this person doing here? We're moving from one space to the other. And if we're doing an event in the vestry, we will sometimes use the kitchen, that small kitchen there. And when we're doing an event in the Dorothy, we might sometimes use the kitchen there. But it's all kind of specified within the rental agreements that we have. And we typically, like, we have an outstanding just 3 rentals a month of, like, the vestry, the Dorothy, or, like, if we wanted to use the cafe for something, right? And anything in addition to that, we communicate that with Christine. Was that helpful?
Instance, wants to hang out in the cafe and use the Wi-Fi. Or let's say the bathrooms that you ordinarily are using are used or whatever, and you're someplace else. I mean, ordinarily in a big building with common spaces, you have specific places, that people can use if you're renting. And so I just wanted to know how clearly that was. I don't want to, other people want to talk, but I do have a couple more things, but thank you. I mean, that does answer some things for me. Expansion 3, let's see. Sorry about that. Future for insurance, okay. Currently, okay, so what you have, that you use now, is you have, is it part of your current lease where it's 3 times the Dorothy Memorial can be used? And are you asking for additional more space, more times, other than those 2 sessions, other than the 2 pieces that you're using? Are you going to be wanting to use that in addition to that? Is that going to be specified? If that makes any sense.
There we go, okay. Huh? Oh, thank you. Oh, I see, okay. So that's actually a misprint on that thing, because what our lease is 3 rentals. It does not specify which space. So we do a lot of events, whether it's like, we'll do like an overdose prevention training, or we did a Valentine's Day event where we did testing, right? We did that event in the vestry. I think actually more often than not, we use the vestry for events like that. And we'll occasionally use the Dorothy. And so included within our current rental agreement is like a flat fee that covers 3 rentals. And so it was just reflected as the Dorothy. And we don't always use all 3 of those. And then maybe like there'll be a month where we do 4 and then one where we do 1. So it's just kind of an informal, we rent based a lot.
I'm concerned about other people. Let's say, one of the things I would recommend as you go forward, when you're thinking about the times that you're going to use those 2 times, I think that the 4 to 8:30 on a Friday is asking for problems. That was because you've got, first of all, I know, there are some contentious relationships between a business that's there on Park Street. That's going to be one of their busiest times to have an evening, their business. They have a restaurant, and they're going to have a lot of people there. Maybe it would be better to pick a different time where there wouldn't be that just built-in conflict that's just going to get bigger. Also, there's the contra dance. That's the 4th Friday of every month. So that's a lot of people there. And as it gets warmer, there are going to be more people hanging around. It's more likely that people will be doing that. And so I think that's something to consider when you consider that second time. And I think that's it. I hope I didn't take up too much time. Sorry.
Hello, my name is Athena. I'm also a social worker. My question was, I wanted to give a little background information as well. Willie has attempted to do this, provide services in many other locations. However, the city of Bangor has continuously denied him. So with the encampment closing, that means Needlepoint will have nowhere to provide services to our community. Another, I guess, a follow-up question to that is kind of for Catalina. I'm so sorry to put you on the spot in the Maine CDC, knowing that we did have a syringe service here and it is no longer here. And so my question for the Maine CDC is, what accountability is the Maine CDC taking for that and moving forward, learning from, the downfall of HEAL and how it plans to look forward to support Needlepoint in the future so something like that doesn't happen?
Yeah, so how do I start? I feel like we have been very supportive of all of our SSPs. So even with HEAL, when we were hearing things and we had concerns, we tried hard to make sure that we were being fair with how we responded, and we ultimately decided to decertify them. And that was after they had already closed just because of concerns we had. And we did know okay, this is gonna affect not just Bangor, but also the other sites that HEAL was operating in, which are Ellsworth, Deer Isle, Rockland. There are 2 other SSPs in Deer Isle and Rockland that we've been talking with, and I've been supporting them in applying for SSP certification. They've submitted that, so we're processing that now. In terms of Bangor, Wabanaki, Public Health and Wellness, and Needlepoint have been really great in stepping up and meeting that void. We are looking to, because we do have contracts with both of them, we are looking to add more funding into their contracts. And I've been having a lot of conversations with Willie about how to navigate the relationship with the city of Bangor. The city of Bangor we met with them so many times over the past year since we certified Needlepoint, and we've been really trying hard to collaborate with them, because ultimately, right, we can certify an organization for an SSP program, right, but the municipality does have power, right? We've seen it in other municipalities in Sanford, where they did restrict how many syringes the SSP there could distribute. We've seen it in Skowhegan, where they limited how an SSP can operate there, ultimately driving out main access points from their site there. So we've been really careful with trying to navigate that relationship with the city, and Willie's been great in compromising a lot, because we initially certified them for other sites in the city that we then had to take back because the city had concerns about them. And so we've been trying really hard to find new places and have more conversations with the city of Bangor and see well, is this more acceptable? What about this? They've stated to us that public spaces are not okay, but private property is fine. So that's what we've been looking into more and more. But that's the kind of support we're trying to give. I'm in a lot of these meetings with city managers, city councils. I'm trying to get funding moved around so we could amend contracts and provide funding so that they can meet this increase that they're seeing in services. Yeah, does that answer? Yes, thank you. Anything? Okay, cool.
Okay. So just a reminder to try to keep things brief with questions and what we want to fully answer, hear people's questions, but also make sure that we have a chance for everybody to hear. And we're running almost, maybe 50 minutes or so. So we want to be mindful of time.
Please read those. I want you to read those now. I want you to read her comments now.
So I had planned to offer the last step of this as the comment section, but Sue was concerned that people are leaving. And so I will share, Christine, our office administrator, has provided a letter that she wanted to offer for the comments to just give you her perspective of working with Needlepoint. She said, I'm the administrator at UUSB with a mother of 2 young children. I want to share my experiences as a UUSB administrator and a resident of Bangor with kids. As an office administrator, I probably have the most direct experience with Needlepoint Sanctuary, using the building, and how it has worked over the years. Out of respect for everyone's time, here are my bullet points. NPS is responsive to UUSB needs and adjusts to requests that we make. This includes posting safety guidelines, sharing the building with other groups during multiple rental situations, and shifting spaces for building use as UUSB has requested. 2, they treat the building with care and respect. They clean, sweep, and shovel. They often assist in moving furniture and other large tasks when UUSB has needed. When they notice an issue in the building, they report it immediately so it can get repaired and keep the building in good condition. 3, their presence in and around the building has made me feel more safe, knowing that I am not alone if something happens. Staff, volunteers, and participants have always been pleasant and respectful. One of the most I am most proud of working for UUSB is that it feels like we are a church that walks the walk, and there are so many that just talk the talk. I think that there is an opportunity to continue fulfilling our mission and living our values. As a parent and Bangor resident, one of my primary concerns I see about NPS and their services has to do with the comfort level and safety of young families. So I want to briefly share my experience and opinion from that perspective. 1, I have Had my own children in this building and also have run the OWL kindergarten through second grade program last year when NPS was around. NPS staff, volunteers, and participants have always been kind, friendly, and respectful around my kids. My children have never expressed discomfort. 2, NPS efforts in Bangor leave me more confident that the parks are cleaner and safer when my family is out and about, thanks to their cleaning events and their exchange programs. 3, I am proud to live in a city where we have people who actively are working to help people stay healthy, safe, and connected. And those efforts help me know that my kids are growing up in a healthy, safe, and more protected environment. I am sorry that I could not be here to share my experience directly, but my opinions and answer your questions, but I hope that this letter helps provide some of that information. So, all right.
My name is Devin, and I'd like to share a little anecdote. This past summer, I spent a few hours down at the waterfront on 2 different days picking up garbage that was littered about, and I was surprised by the amount of needles that I found there. Some of them out in the open, some kind of obscured in foliage, and I was a bit reckless in my endeavors to clean all of the trash. I'm very lucky I didn't get poked with the way I was rummaging, but I'm personally confident that the reason that the waterfront is as messy as it is because very few people bother to take care of it. And I feel like this space is well cared for, and I feel like being very thorough, as I am confident that volunteers who clean will keep this community safe. What I'm more concerned about and what I have a question about is what procedures are the volunteers who clean after Needlepoint Sanctuary taking to ensure their safety? And also, is there a way that I could be a part of that cleanup?
Absolutely, we'd love to have you. So I think I've shared this with the council, but you can make this available to the whole congregation. We have a very fascinating document called our Staff Policies and Procedures document, which outlines all these things. It's 85 pages. You can have fun reading it. So what we do is we do basic needle stick prevention, injury prevention training, right? And what that sort of looks like is we encourage people to always wear closed-toed shoes in any of the facilities where, syringes, whether used or clean, might be, right? So if you're down in the basement, if you're coming to outreach with us, or any time that we're going to be in that Dorothy space, closed-toed shoes. When cleaning up, gloves, a lot of that is the trickiest part. Like if you're doing a cleanup, where there's leaves and stuff like that, that's where people are most likely to be poked. I think we've only had 1 needle stick in 7 years of operation, and it was Zach during a community cleanup like that, I think. He's okay, yeah. And we have clear policies for what you do after the fact and what our follow-up is, which is, you thoroughly wash it, you go to walk-in care, and you get a prescription for something called PEP, which is just a medication that can prevent HIV if you are exposed to it. In terms of those actual risks, they're pretty low. You're much more likely to get hepatitis from an accidental needle stick. I don't know if there are actually any recorded transmission cases of HIV through an accidental needle stick. And the majority of bloodborne diseases that do transfer like that happen in medical settings, right? Nurses a lot of times, right in the field, from one vein to another kind of situation. And in terms of getting involved, every month we're going to do a basic volunteer training, which kind of goes over our safety guidelines, overdose prevention, and what our services look like. And we are now requiring that in order for people to volunteer with any of our things, that they have to attend that. So that's always going to be on the first Tuesday of the month moving forward for a while, and would love to have you there.
I have another question based on something you said. You said that places with leaves and other kinds of obstructions are where people are most likely to place these. And I can't help but think that a large part of that might be, kind of a culture of shame around drug use. Is there anything where you guys are doing to kind of push back against that here?
It's at the heart of like everything we do, right? So it's about modeling, I think, respect for one another and for oneself in terms of you're taking some basic steps to take care of your own health. And it's often people who maybe they're not doing many things that are traditionally very healthy for you, but we're trying to encourage them to do a few things that are the greatest indicator of proper syringe disposal in any community in which there is injection drug use is community support of programs that work with drug users. So when you have a community that, like many communities, treats drug users like the scum of the earth, they're not going to carry their syringes on them, right? They're going to use it and they're going to chuck it somewhere because they don't want to get caught with it, right? So increased policing, communities that are heavily stigmatizing towards drug users, all these things lead to these same drug users kind of having a case of, what I like to call the F-its, where you don't care, they don't care, right? And they feel unsafe to carry those things on them and bring them to a program like ours. In unsupportive communities also make programs like ours harder to exist. Is that helpful?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sam Morse. My partner is Ellen Tarashi. She's the nurse practitioner that offers testing services at some of these warming shelters and other areas around Bangor. She dragged me to one of the warming shelters as a volunteer. I reluctantly went. I will be the first to admit that I tend to dehumanize unhoused people. And that's something difficult for me to say, but I do it. And to go and see Willie work and what was going on at the warming shelter was great. And I just think it takes a lot of courage for an institution or a church, whoever, to help these people that are really grateful for what you guys are doing. So just that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Hi, I have some concern and I have a challenge for us. I'm concerned because as we increase, I'm glad Needlepoint is here and I'm all for your doing the new project. And as we do that, I know from experience that with Needlepoint being here and being so wonderful and all of us being such a wonderful community, we've had more people who are drug users come to the bean supper. And so I know that they will probably come to other things that we do because we're welcoming, we're here. We also have had some difficulty at the bean supper. We've had people nodding off. One time somebody woke up from nodding off because somebody went to see if they were okay and got verbally aggressive through some food. And so things like that could happen. My challenge to us as a community is that the majority, whoever wants to get together and get educated on how to handle those things, to get educated on overdosing. We have Narcan in the kitchen. We probably should look at the date of that and see if we need to redo it. But we need to be educated, and some of us have had a 2-hour training by Willie on overdosing, but not many of us had. And so we need to do that as a community. So I don't know how we get that to happen yet, but I think that that's really important for us.
Hi, my name is Wendy Erickson, and I actually wrote something out, and I'm just going to sort of read it, and I have copies for both of you. Just so you know where I'm coming from, 10 and a half years ago, I guess it's still so hard to say this, my brother took his life, and drugs were involved. So these drugs kill people, and they destroy families. And I know we've had other families in the church impacted by this. I am fully on board with the harm reduction work that Willie does, and I think very highly of him, and I've met quite a few of the people who work with him, and you're all wonderful people. I call Willie the Saint Teresa of Bangor. And, but all of that being said, I have reservations about the clinic being in this location. I think there are a couple of reasons. One is the lack of accountability among drug users. Technically, in the state of Maine, everything that they are doing is illegal. And I know it's a tough population. I know it's a very complicated formula. I know it's a disease. But it's very difficult to anticipate what behaviors will be exhibited from and by these people. Can you all hear me? No? Okay. And condoning and enabling the use of drugs and enabling users is a concern for me, because I think it's a piece we don't hear about. We hear about how difficult it is for addicts, and I'm sure it is, but it's also, I'd like to see some degree of accountability come from that community, because I think it's important to recognize that we want to get them off of the drugs. The other thing that I think that Willie cannot control, even though I'm sure he would be willing to, is, and you touched on it a little bit, Carol, is the spillover. Because we have more and more people, I spend a lot of time here, and we have more and more people coming onto the facility asking for help when we're closed. I'm here Saturday evenings, I go to the door, I say, I'm sorry, we're closed. I want to come in, I need food, I need clothes, I need needles. And I said, well, at least I can tell you that I have nothing to do with that. But it's just the whole, the fear. I come in and collect laundry and deliver laundry twice a week here. And one morning at 11 in the morning, I come in the door, in the Dorothy door, and there were 6 men. I didn't know who they were. I didn't recognize any of them as people I've been introduced to by Willie. They were smoking they weren't doing anything bad, but they were smoking on the ramp to the Dorothy Memorial. I was not going to run that gauntlet to try to get into the building. So for 43 years I've been coming here, and this is the first time I have ever felt fear. And you know, I think that despite the fact that I think you will do everything in your power to keep the space safe during the center's itself being open, the clinic, there is undeniably an uptick in the number of people coming here, and it's frightening. I'm a 71-year-old woman. I'm usually not afraid, but I am afraid now. I'm afraid because of the association with that. So the other thing that I'm concerned about, I'm also on the board of the Bangor Public Library, and you may have read in the papers about the horrible things that are happening there, and you know, the impact of having more unhoused people there, and there are people going into the bathroom and overdosing, and, you know, and they have no choice to let people in. It's a public building. We have a choice. We are also trying to attract young families to the church. If we don't get more young families pretty soon, we're just going to die out. So many of us are older, and we need new members here. And as a parent, I know Christine has had a positive experience with you as a group, and I'm sure none of your staff would harm children, but the fact is that it's about the image, and I think image matters, and I think we really want to attract families, and we want it to be a very safe and wholesome place, and I think this is going to be a deterrent for us to be able to do that. I really do. So I think that we are at a crossroads as a congregation, and you know, we need more money, frankly, and this would bring more money in, and that's always a good thing. But I think we really need to prioritize what we want here. And that has nothing to do with Needlepoint Sanctuary in terms of making decisions, but those of us who find this is our spiritual home, and tenants come and go, but we really need, first and foremost, to feel safe in our own environment here. And we should be able to come into the building without being fearful. And I guess we have to weigh the pride and the honor of housing an organization here who does very good work against the needs of our congregation and our future and our current ability to deal with this. So that's where I'm coming from. There really weren't any questions there, I don't think.
My name's Linda, and all I have is questions. And it's mostly for our council, because I feel you are the group that needs to answer Wendy's concerns, Suzanne's concerns, how we keep our sanctuary a sanctuary for the congregation, as well as a place for a program like Needlepoint Sanctuary. And I think the people associated with Needlepoint, the work you're doing is great. But I had a sleepless night with some serious concerns. One, a question, and I don't know if Connie's still here, are the children in our C program being taught needle safety? And does an adult check the bathroom before a child uses it every time? Again, for our council, do we have a plan to deal with public relations in the event of an overdose or death in our building? And a question for staff and council. Has anyone on the staff or the council talked to the staff at other needle exchange programs about issues we might face, especially safety issues? I learned last week that a group that meets here is the Drug Users Union. And I was kind of surprised by the purpose of the meeting because it didn't seem to jive with the other work of Needlepoint Sanctuary. And I wondered if the council was aware of different particular groups that are being sponsored to meet here. And do they align with our values as you use? I learned a couple days ago there was an overdose in the building on Thanksgiving when someone was unresponsive, had to be taken by ambulance. And I wondered where that happened. Was it in the Dorothy where that group with Needlepoint's group, or was it somewhere else in the building? And that really concerns me if it was somewhere else in the building. But we were not, as a congregation, given any information about that. And when something like that happens, what's the plan for informing the congregation? I know when a needle was found in a bathroom in the children's area, it was dealt with very well because information was given to people right away about exactly what happened, where, and what was done. I'm sorry, that was a little preachy, but it is a question. Have we thought through all these scenarios that are going to happen, already have happened? I was really concerned about cleanup outdoors, but Suzanne brought that up, or someone did. And I was really glad a phrase I heard that I haven't heard from Willie before or from Needlepoint is that Needlepoint Sanctuary Services are a portal to recovery services. And I see people nodding, but to me that's the most critical thing, is that we're not just supplying needles for the drug use to continue, but that it's providing an environment, a context where people might consider recovery. Okay. Well, those are just the questions that kept me up last night. So I think it's a very complicated issue, a very complicated question. It's not just, do we want you to be able to provide these services? It's how do you provide 2 sanctuaries in one building? And I look to our council for the answers. I think, and however we can help, we will. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Yep.
Public speaking is not my forte. Thank you, Linda, very much. And I love the idea of how do we provide 2 sanctuaries within one space. I'm just going to speak to what my understanding is of the Maine Drug Users Union. And the little bit that I've read and understand is that it's a human rights organization. It's about recognizing that all of humanity have the same rights to everything we all enjoy: housing, food, community. Yes?
Public Health and Community Services. And I will say it's one of the reasons why I came to the UU for the very first time and brought my family here for Easter, because I learned that it was such a welcoming place that would open such a collaborative program. So yeah, and so the UU's User Mean, it is a political active group. It's also about, it really represents come as you are, and it also, one time we had someone there and they went to detox the next day, and so it's an example of how wraparound services really work. And one thing that I will just share that's coming out of that, those meetings that are happening monthly, is the group is working to really make sure the hospitals, when they go receive care, are treating them with dignified care and urging them to do training. So a lot is coming out of those groups. So I just wanted to speak to that.
No, apologize. Thank you very much. I don't really know that I have anything else to add after that. I'll give it to you, Zach.
I'm going to pass it to Willie. I think many of the issues you've raised, Linda, are really important ones for us to focus on as a council in terms of ensuring again, I echo the framing of these two sanctuaries and how can we safely and securely have that overlap. I think your points about ensuring having the safety and security protocols associated with our SE program are really important. I think we've done a lot of work towards that end, but I think being able to communicate that more clearly and ensuring those are in place before we move forward with any expansion is really important. We do have a communications committee as part of our work that is working on thinking about some of the PR angles, right? How do we as a church both articulate what we're doing if we choose to take this step? How do we speak about anything that might be foreseeable? And really, also, how do we communicate effectively internally, right? How do we, you mentioned the finding of the needle early on in this relationship and how that was communicated, making sure that we communicate internally with our beloved community about those developments, anything that happens, recognizing the serious interest that we all have and concern that we all have to make sure that this works well if we choose to go forward with it. Willie, do you want to speak to any of the issues that Linda raised, particularly about past incidents, maybe what happened on Thanksgiving?
Yeah, that wasn't us. That was another organization that rented the space. It just shows that things like this are, they're common experiences in our community. Right, as Wendy said, the library is constantly dealing with issues like this. You have people who are unhoused, who have nowhere to go, and they are drug users, right? So they're going to use drugs in places where they can get into, and that's how accidents happen. And we have pretty comprehensive safety protocols, which is why nothing like that has ever happened, knock on wood, in our spaces. And we have good communication and relationships with people to, I think, ensure that it doesn't happen in the future. In terms of the drug users union, look, the reality is that not every aspect of what we do is going to be everyone's cup of tea, right? And that's okay, right? Like this, I think the inclusiveness of this congregation and its views can recognize there might be aspects where it's like, oh, I don't know about that drug users union thing, right? So what's interesting about the users union is I kind of started it from more of like a pretty radical perspective of the abolition of the war on drugs and things like that. And then the people who came to the meeting made it theirs. And the conversations they started happening were actually much more similar to what Wendy was saying, actually, right? They were talking about accountability. They were talking about the way that they treat one another in the community, about the way that they are treated and perceived, and how they can change those narratives, right? So from that, you have things like community cleanups that they organized, efforts to address like the way that people are discriminated against in medical settings, right? And all these things, like, and it might often seem like, oh, this idea of two sanctuaries. No, it's one sanctuary, right? And one community. This is not a separate community with special little issues that are unique to them that do not impact you or your families or your community. These affect us all, whether it's the transmission of diseases or, and I hate to reduce this to a financial angle, taxes and how much money we are paying towards things like, I don't know what the cost breakdown is, but if we're talking about a 50% reduction in the rate of HIV or hepatitis C in our community, we are talking about, in the absence of that, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that people are paying on the back end to cover treatment and the various other health issues that are going to be impacted in that, and just the way in which it can ripple out and impact the community. Safety. I do think it is important to understand this decision as a really important decision for your congregation, right? I do think it is a crossroads. I think it represents something very important. And I think that there are aspects and realities that come with our program and our presence within this space that are different than what you are used to. Someone was speaking to the question of rentals. Like, yeah, you might get less rentals of, I don't know, people who go to the Tarantine coming here. But I'll tell you what, you're going to get a lot more rentals from community organizations, from the dozens of different organizations that people in here work for and represent. And I think if you broke down the math, that in the last year you probably had more rentals than in previous years, perhaps. I'm not sure. Maybe Sue can chime in on that one in terms of the, I don't know exactly how that breaks down. What I'm saying is I think that there are considerations to be made in terms of like just the reality of being a space that offers services, being a space in which many people are coming into all the time, right? But I think in the short term and the long run, it's going to be a boon to your congregation in so many ways. And I imagine in more young faces and young families being present here, because I seem to see a lot of young faces in this audience today. So.
The one thing I did want to add is that I'm starting to hear conversation about we and them, and I think it's really important that we are all of us, no matter who or what we're doing in our private lives. So.
Is it working? Oh, it is working. Okay, okay. I'm Zach Campbell. I'm one of the co-founders, and I'm the president of the board. I've been addicted to heroin since I was 19 years old. I'm 31 now. I just want people to know that what we do is a radical act of compassion. If we could, we would amend the Constitution to make it so everybody's guaranteed to housing, that everyone's guaranteed to food, everybody's guaranteed to shelter. But we can't, right? We have to deal with the conditions as they are. And what we're really trying to do is, what I think people have said, and it's very important, is kind of create one community and not other drug users. Will there be, hurdles? Will there be kind of things that probably make people uncomfortable as time goes on? And yeah, things will happen, right? But I do think that in the long term, it will be a lot better for the congregation, for the community at large, and I do think that we will start to ameliorate some of this suffering that we see in our community. I have to get going. I'm going to leave the info rate up here at the table. But I just want to thank you so much for having us and for giving us a space to make this point. It's an invaluable service that we're doing. It's been thousands and thousands of hours of time that's been given by our volunteers, and also thousands, who knows how many untold thousands of overdoses that have been reversed by the Narcan that we pass out, on top of the supplies that we give out to the community. So thank you so much for having us. Thank you so much for allowing us to make our case. And yeah, hope we work together. Bye.
Okay, so I'm Kayla, and first I wanted to share a little experience I had with MPS. I understand after the first warming center, there were some issues. I was leading the fellowship hour after the second, and at least 3 different staff members or volunteers came up to ask us if everything was cleaned to our satisfaction, if everything was going okay. Like, the conscientiousness and responsiveness to issues is something that I'd like to encourage everyone to keep in the front of our minds, because yes, there are going to be issues. It's change, it's uncomfortable, it always is uncomfortable when things change. And I think it's more important not to focus on the bumps in the road, but on the responses to those bumps. I do have a few questions about the impact MPS has. You guys touched a little bit on how not having clean needles does not reduce drug use. I was wondering if you had more details about how much that access to clean needles does have positive impacts on health. You've already said the 50% reduction in HIV. I haven't heard as much talk about hepatitis. And also that the services that the needles are a gateway to offering people, how those increase the likelihood of them getting into rehab. I was wondering if you could give us a little more information about that, like how much does it increase that likelihood? How long after participants first start accessing services do you start seeing those kinds of changes? Basically, I'm looking to understand better the impact NPS has on our community and the impact we can have on our community through supporting you.
Yeah, I'll be brief and then pass it over to Carolina to get into the statistics. So studies have shown up to 5 times more likely to go to rehab or into recovery. So that is an injection drug user or a drug user who has attended a syringe service program is 5 times more likely to enter treatment, right? The work itself, I mean, the measurable impact, like I can give you statistics, like we know that the naloxone that we've distributed since we started in 2018 has reversed, and this is just the data that we've taken, over 1,000 overdoses. So that's not 1,000 individual lives, but that is, you know, probably 500, 600, 700 or so lives in the greater Bangor area. And again, that's just the data that we've gotten back. I think there is statewide overdose prevention data in terms of like a lot of what's been happening, but it's difficult to measure, right? Because some of it is kind of, is this too loud? I'm sorry, I see you're trying to cover your ears. Oh, okay, my apologies. A lot of the data that comes out of programs like these is in the, it's in the negative, right? Because it's like, it's difficult to actually measure quantitatively how many cases of HIV or hepatitis have been prevented because we don't know, right? But then you can see, oh, there's 16, there's 18 new HIV cases, and it just goes, go, go, boom, 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 boom. And that's what happens when a program like that isn't around or goes under, right? In terms of recovery outcomes, you know, first of all, I do think that as a society, we have to get over this idea. Right now, our society in the mainstream, there are 2 acceptable outcomes for drug use. Dead. That's what our society is saying, right? Dead or sober. There's a whole spectrum there, right? A spectrum of people who might relapse for a period of time and use drugs again. We want them to stay alive when they're in the midst of that until they get sober again. And people deserve care and dignity, healthcare, respect, even if they choose never to get sober. I'm sorry to say this, there are some people who never get sober and will never get sober. But in terms of some of the recovery experiences we've had, the other day, Luke and I got someone into detox. I'd say we knew him for about 6 to 7 months. And when he was sitting down and talking to us before we made the call for detox, he said, "You're the only people I feel comfortable doing this with. There's no other program I feel comfortable doing this with." So that was because of the warming center. That's when we really kind of took him under our wing, so to speak, and we built that trust. So it can take a lot of time, right? It's like I've worked with people for 3 months and gotten them into detox, and then I've worked with people for 5 years, and they're nothing's changed, really, right? Like they haven't gotten HIV and they haven't died. That's good, but you know, there's a lot of data, but so much of this stuff, especially when it comes to like questions of like recovery, is just this like wilderness you're wandering in of like, oh, what do you mean by recovery? Do you mean like complete abstinence from all substances, as like traditional recovery advocates within the 12-step community say is the only valid form of recovery? Or do you mean someone on medication-assisted treatment who's taking medication every day for the rest of their life to deal with their opiate use disorder? Or maybe someone stops using heroin and fentanyl and they go to festivals once a month and they do a bunch of Molly and cocaine or something like that. Is that person not in recovery? It's kind of a nightmare, actually, working in this field where you're engaging in such critical public health intervention and you still have to field all these like kind of like, well, what about getting them sober kind of stuff? It's like we do our best and we try to provide that when it's what that person wants, and we're proven to be very good at doing that. But yeah, before I go on like a whole, whole thing.
I can speak a little bit about Hep C, HIV. So nationally, I mentioned earlier, right? Like for the past few years, Maine has had the highest case rates in the nation for Hep C, Hep B, and Hep A, or at least it's been in the top 3 states that's had the highest case rates. In Maine specifically, the largest risk factors for Hep C, Hep B, and Hep A actually are injection drug use or just drug use. And so that's why SSPs are really important, right? Like they're providing services, they're providing sterile syringes. For Hep C, HIV are primarily in Maine transmitted through, not so much HIV, but Hep C transmitted through blood-to-blood contact, something you're reusing or like sharing syringes with other people, right? That's how we're spreading Hep C and HIV. But there's data that shows that like it's the 50% is just, it's for Hep C and HIV, like it's reduced transmission for both of those by 50%. And Willie mentioned people are 5 times more likely to enter treatment if they are accessing SSP services. They are also 3 times more likely to reduce injection drug use frequency. And there's like other data that I have here that like I don't think is super important, but like it's also just cost effective if we're thinking about it that way, which I don't really like to think about it that way. Like these are people, not like we're not trying to save money, but there is data that shows that right, for reducing it by 50%, annually I think we spend $15 billion treating Hep C, and to treat one person living with HIV in their lifetime, it's $510,000. So when we're reducing by 50%, right, we're saving a lot of our funding for healthcare. So it's much better to like invest in SSPs and redirect that funding towards having more SSPs and increasing their services so that people, are injecting safely and aren't transmitting things like Hep C and HIV. In terms of naloxone, I don't manage that kind of data, but like I look at it frequently, and it's SSPs honestly that are distributing the bulk of naloxone into the communities. So again, we don't have data on like how directly that correlates with like how many overdoses SSPs are directly reversing, or how much SSPs are directly preventing transmission of HIV and Hep C, but they are doing a lot of this work, and a lot of it that sorry. Lost my train of thought. So, but yeah, SSPs are just super important, right? Like they are there's just evidence that shows that they are reducing transmission, that they are providing the resources needed to inject safely and to reverse overdoses. Anything else specifically you were looking for? That SSPs offer? Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of SSPs offer things like linkage to care, like they'll connect people with doctors for like whatever health needs they have. They'll connect them with like social services, with mental health services, with treatment. And again, like Willie was mentioning, like sometimes it takes time to get them connected to those services, even just like basic healthcare needs, right? There's a lot of distrust that people have, and rightly so, with a lot of our systems. But SSPs do a really great job of like really humanizing them, offering compassion, and letting them know that the resources are there when they are ready. And that's why we're seeing like 5 times more likely to enter treatment, 3 times more likely to reduce injection drug use, because over time they're like really accepting this information and applying it in their lives. Yeah, a lot of SSPs are able to do that. It's hard, right? Like some places have more resources than others. If you're in a more rural locations, it's harder to get people connected. But a lot of our SSPs like do the most. Like I've had people to talk about like, yeah, like I will literally like they tell me they need something, I will literally drive them to whatever service they need. So it's not always just like, here's this place, you should call it. But they're doing a lot of like more active things, right? Where like here's like a bus card, or here I will drive you right now if this is what you need, which you don't always see in other services. But yeah, very very impactful.
Thank you. I'm just mindful of the time. This is all really great information and whatnot, and I want to try and bring us to focus on the proposal that we have before us. And some of this information is useful, but our panelists can hang out afterwards and get into some of the more detailed things. But we have, it looks like 3 or 4 people. Pat, are you in line? Okay, so we've got 4 people, and Sue, are there people online that have questions? No. Okay, so we've got 4 more folks. So if we can just kind of keep focused on the kind of the proposal right now, and thank you everybody for hanging in there. I think this is a really useful conversation, and we're getting a lot out of it. But I also want to be mindful that we have been running quite a while, and people before this were sitting in a service for at least an hour beforehand. So I just want to keep it moving along.
And I know Willie talked about this, and the person ahead of me had a very similar question, but it has to do with the recovery dimension of the program. And I understand the continuum and how difficult it is and so on, but I guess for me, I'd feel more comfortable in the needle exchange is an important aspect of it, but the overarching goal is recovery. I understand it, and hopefully we can get to that. If this were framed in terms of recovery, and I don't know, and maybe Willie can comment on this, when people come into the program, is it strictly I can exchange needles and keep myself from getting whatever, or is there kind of a expectation that if you're participating, recovery is the end goal? And I'm wondering if there is some commitment for recovery in the minds of people who come in, and how that all works. That's kind of my question.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So to have the expectation of recovery within the service that we provide is harmful. If people are coming into our doors to get syringes, to get naloxone as drug users, as people in active drug use, there's a good chance that they know what recovery is. Many of them have been in recovery in the past. If the sign on the door says, to access our services, you must want to get sober, forget it. Terrible service. It's like, I don't know, selling people cotton candy and saying I don't know. It just doesn't work, right? From a best practice point of view, like our goal is not to get everyone to be clean and sober and like get their stuff together, right? It happens a lot, and it's always a joy to see it happen. And as a person in recovery, working with people in active drug use, oftentimes it is really heartbreaking, right? To be in this situation where it's like, here you go, here you go. It's kind of based on what people express as their need at that moment. And then through that, the support and the recovery really does slip in. So one of the ways that our program defines recovery is as any positive change. And that is an expectation of our program, that some positive change be happening, right? So if you are coming to a syringe exchange program and you are getting sterile syringes when previously you were sharing syringes or reusing your own, that is a positive change. And we're going to bring a degree of like dignity and respect and like joy to a person being able to accomplish that. You know, one of the things I always tell people when they get naloxone from us, and by the way, if there's a definition that you hear that you don't know, please speak up, because there's a lot of specific kind of language here. So naloxone, Narcan, overdose reversal drug. It's a miracle drug that can reverse an opiate overdose. Sometimes we'll have people get naloxone from us and we'll ask them, have you had to use any naloxone in the last week? And they'll be like, yeah, I had to reverse an overdose on my girlfriend or so-and-so. And what I always say is, thank you for looking out for your community, right? Because Maine, when we started this, there was around 600 overdoses a year, and then it went boom, 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 and went all the way up to like 874 before coming back down. And studies have shown the role that Maine's naloxone distribution program has had on decreasing those overdoses, and the integral role that programs like ours have played. What those things don't talk about, though, is all those overdose reversals are being reversed by drug users, right? So we have this community that is often looked down upon, despised, trod upon, looked as lesser, get your stuff together, get sober, da-da-da-da-da. They are, in fact, the first responders to a crisis like, it's like we talk about like the overdose crisis, this crisis, that crisis, so many crises in this country right now. But the scope of this, if it was just happening casually to anyone else, people would be so upset. But they're not so upset because it's happening to drug addicts. Because a lot of people don't care about drug addicts. 100,000 people a year in their prime dying from an accidental, what we call an overdose crisis. We get into a lot of complexities here, right? But the current overdose crisis is better understood as a poison drug supply crisis. So for example, alcohol during the prohibition era, people were making like these, were making moonshine that was like 100,000 proof, and people were going blind, right? So that was a direct product of that drug being illegal. We have the same thing happening in today's society with the drug supply, which is kind of what's driving a lot of the death and destruction. But yeah, any positive change, that was come up with by a guy named Dan Bigg from the Chicago Recovery Alliance. Encourage everyone to look him up, because he's pretty much responsible for bringing community-based naloxone distribution to this country.
Hi, I am Pat, and I have some questions for my own curiosity. I got my degree in geography, so that made me a geographer, and we are interested in spatial locational patterns. And I'm wondering how many other like centers are there, and how do they tend to locate in populated areas, i.e. urban, cities, or churches? Do they follow churches? Do they follow addiction? Do they follow deaths? What phenomena determine where these centers are made, and how many are there, say, in Bangor? I've heard reference to many, or others at least, and I just don't know where. This, we're the only ones? Oh, I see. Yeah, okay, all right, thank you. That's what I wanted to know.
And previously there was Health Equity Alliance, and in terms of like location, like I said, I would have never brought this proposal forward if the city of Bangor had allowed us to continue doing what we were doing for 5 years. And what we were doing is we were doing a mobile exchange, and we were doing it from Pickering Square and Pierce Park. But the visibility of those locations led to a lot of community backlash, in particular from the small business community, that really, when we're getting into these services, a lot of the times, and you've heard it reflected from folks in this congregation, we love your services, we love what you're doing, but don't do it here. Oh, we love immigrants, we love black people, we love it, but don't come to our community, right? It's that same thing that's reflected in the services we're doing. So the difficulties that my program has in finding a home to offer services are the same for programs all over the country. So we will find a home where we can, where we're accepted. If it was up to me, it'd be like, right downtown, super accessible, giant building, lots of other services right next to it. But the city planners of this world are more concerned with profits than they are with people. So, that's why you end up seeing spaces, organizations like ours partnering with compassionate churches, or partnering with, whatever agency is also supportive of their work. It's different in any environment. So it's going to be a very different situation in Oakland, California versus rural Maine, right? Like, for parts of rural Maine, the best bet is probably a mail order program, but then you don't have person-to-person contact. I think for Bangor really needs not just like more programs like ours, but similar programs all kind of nested together, the resources being brought to bear on the problems that we're dealing, because all the problems we're dealing with, it's like this intersection of like dozens of different problems, right? So it's like housing, substance abuse, this and that. The resources that exist are not enough. They've done some studies that an SSP program that has $1 million in funding should really have 10 million. And that like 1 to 10 model kind of plays out. So programs are operating with about 10% of the funding that they need. And that's even true for Wabanaki Public Health and Wellness is a very large agency. Their syringe service program is like the smallest part of their largest agency. Yeah, I hope that was helpful.
If it's necessary, I don't know what the warming centers, how they're operated, I know whom they serve, but I would like to offer, if it's usable, a nice wool blanket.
We'll take it.
Is that, I mean, I don't know if they sleep here. I don't know.
Not right now because we don't have a sprinkler system. And we might not do the warming center again here this year just because of the temperature, but yeah, a nice wool blanket, someone would treasure that. We'll take it. Okay.
Semi-time. So, yeah, and so my name is Kate, and I actually don't have a question, but given the time, I really have a comment that is very important to me. And Willie just hit the nail on the head. It's the mentality of not in my backyard that is the most concerning mentality for me. NPS does phenomenal good. I'm often here in this building alone with occasionally a member of NPS here. I have never had any negative interactions. They have been helpful. When we're setting up for the yard sale, they'll carry heavy stuff for us. When you sit on those soft chairs in the Dorothy, now that didn't come out of our budget. So I want you to think about things like that. This is a beneficial, mutual relationship where we have the opportunity to serve our community in a way that other places are saying, not in my backyard. And I really needed that to be said. Thank you.
So thank you, Kate, for kind of, I think, you've summed up a lot of what's been said here today. I want to thank everybody for their sharing of questions. I also want to thank our panelists for providing answers. We will, we're still in the process of evaluating this and putting things together. But if you have other thoughts that you want to share, you share them with a council member or with me or with Sue. Sue, you've got some closing thoughts?
Yeah, I want people to know that council meetings are open. We do not work in a vacuum, though not a lot of people attend them, except the ones that are invited to attend. So our next council meeting is the third Wednesday in March, and this will be on the docket. It will not be the only thing on the docket. We're a very busy council. People are invited to attend that. It is on Zoom. You have to get permission ahead of time because we do not want to be Zoom bombed. That happened once and it was not fun. But it is not a comment period. It would be a time for listening to the council having their discussion. And as soon as we can, we will be making the final decision on Needlepoint, which I personally hope will be in the positive. Bangor needs these services. I thank you for coming, and
Yep.
Drew, there you go.
Nope, and I just say, building a beloved community is not something that is easy. It is not something that happens quickly. It takes time in building relationships, as Willie has been telling us a little bit about. That's the mission of Needlepoint. And so thank you all for being here and helping build a beloved community. Thank you. Be well.